Bienvenidos, amigos, amigas, a mi presentación de hoy. Mi español no es muy bueno. Yo hablo como un tejano, so I kind of talk like this. Así que tengo una traductora encantadora para ayudarme. Entonces, la presentación será en inglés. I'm a hacker. Tengo licencia oficial de hacker. I make sure you got the sheet that says I'm a hacker. I'm not sorry for these things because I use my powers for good and not. It's one of my friends this morning. He had a 0-day about traffic lights. He reported it responsibly. I don't like to sound like a sales guy, but sometimes I do. So if everybody wants to take a picture of bingo and maybe play along, and if you get bingo today, I've got some prizes in the back if you get bingo. So everybody take a moment to take a picture. And, if you hear me say these words, then you get to mark a cell and you can get a prize. First one, that is. So I've only got one or two. If you also stop by the booth today or yesterday, you get there's a drawing that you got a number at the very, very beginning of coming in here. We also have another giveaway after my talk. Okay, with all this silly stuff, let's get started. There are a lot of people out there making a lot of money off cyber criminals, or the cyber criminals making a lot of money. Right now, a typical city worker probably doesn't get paid that much, even if they're a cybersecurity expert. It's probably below what market rate is. And that's not anybody's fault, because most people don't like to pay taxes. And if you do, please raise your hand so we can make fun of you. Okay, so I know I don't, right? So, but no matter the salary or anything else like that, even if you're a guy like me that gets paid to come in and do big stuff for big companies, we're not the ones making the most money. I may get a nice salary, but the criminals are making the most money. Last year, they made $10.5 trillion. That's with a T. Cyber criminals made last year. Then that's way more money than GDP of very many countries. Probably 80% of all countries out there, that's higher than their gross domestic product. System intrusion, social engineering, and those sorts of incidents are pretty commonplace. And it's just really, really hard to stop, because the two things I just mentioned aren't problems with your digital infrastructure. It's problems with the humans that operate them. It's easy because the weakest part of it all is you and me, right? I even find myself sometimes like stopping before I click on something in an email. You got me, almost got me. And it happens to me too, and I'm a cybersecurity expert. So who's doing all this, right? There's three main groups I want to concentrate on today. And, the first one of these, is many people know, sometimes they're known as Dragonfly, Elonite, Ember Bear, really funny names that don't make any sense at all. But the reason why they call them this is because it's usually someone's initials that actually writes the ransomware or malware or even the playbook when they're doing social engineering. So I don't know if anybody knew that before, but that's typically what it is. It's a reference to the person's name that actually came up with this stuff, or maybe a nickname. Most of these actors right here, and the reason why I mentioned them, Sandworm, they're the ones that kind of started critical infrastructure damage through industrial control systems. Now, most everybody in here lives very, very close to industrial control systems. Some of them are even in your own house. People call them IoT now. They're not really. But the most critical ones are actually really, really close to your house. You just never see them. Actually, you probably do see them. You just don't know. It doesn't register. Anybody ever pass by a power substation with big electrical transformers and wires? There's a little hut there that has all the control systems for the entirety of the grid in your area, right? So all the control for the entire neighborhood of all the electrical power and all the safety systems that go along with it, like traffic lights and water pumps for the water systems, all of that gets controlled by that one little hut in there. And it's remotely accessible, right? There's something also called emanations as well, which is a very brand new science. It's been going on with the NSA and some of the other three-letter acronyms with many other governments. And now they can actually hack most things without even having it connected to any network whatsoever, as long as they're close enough to it. So this is called emanation hacking, which is electrical interference. So the Chinese are also pretty bad about it, doing it, because they have some very, very effective reasons why they want to do it. They try to slow down others' economies so their economy is more effective. That's their general remit. Their strategy is that the fact that they want to slow down other economies to make theirs more competitive. And the Lazarus Group, and really what these guys are around for. Does anybody here have any Bitcoin or any kind of crypto coin at all? I do too. It's fine. You can admit it. It's totally okay. It's a great investment tool sometimes. So I've got a couple. I got two wallets. So anyways, these guys, they love robbing those things so they can fund terrorism abroad. And this is all kinds of terrorism, not just that. So most of this stuff is actually very, very simple in a lot of cities. So when there's an outage somewhere or a problem somewhere that doesn't really have an explanation, and maybe the pump had 10 years left in it, or that water pipe probably shouldn't have broken, in a lot of ways, that gets funded by the Bitcoin these guys steal, and they fund it through those particular activities. So even though it's not a direct threat to our cities, it becomes that way because they sponsor what they call lightweight terrorism, just to slow down people's cities or cause other problems, sometimes just civil unrest in other people's countries. So how easy is it to do all this? Well, I can make everybody in this room a hacker in about 5 minutes with 2 websites. One's called Shodan.io, and it's open to the world. And the other one is called, oh gosh, I'm now forgetting it. There's a script site called exploit-db.com. So exploit-db, you can go there all day long. Just look for the device you find on Shodan in the exploit DB. It gives you the code to paste into your computer, and all of a sudden, everybody in here is a hacker within 5 minutes. So I can do it with my grandmother too, and did it. So I know that's kind of funny, but I used to tell grandmothers how to change out motherboards and computers in 1991 with Gateway 2000. So this is making you guys as a hacker is a little easier than having someone's grandmother change out a motherboard on a computer. So speaking of computers and things like that, a lot of these devices are now mostly IoT that are doing things that are kind of nasty to the city. And you're saying, well, we don't see a lot of problems necessarily with electricity or some of these other things that you said, James, so far. That's great. But there's also problems with gas pumps where they put card swipers on there. When they do that, the gas station itself gets hit with a fraud infraction to SWIFT network, which is the banking network that all these transactions go through. And then they can actually lose access to being able to do that transaction, and all of a sudden they find themselves on paper. This happens probably more than anybody would like to know. And then, of course, it can be used to spy on just about anybody, anywhere, at any time. And these are very problematic. Now, you used to be able to buy a lot of that stuff on stuff like Amazon or Temu or what have you. Some of the stuff's been pulled, but it's still widely available on Alibaba and a lot of the other places that I'm sure everybody shops as well. It's not like it's a hidden problem. As a matter of fact, I didn't bring it right here, but I have it in my backpack at the booth. But I have a hacker tool that can rob everybody's car here today at the booth. And then, of course, the one thing the TSA didn't take away from me, they took away my tool set today, so my screwdrivers and stuff like that, but they didn't take away my lockpick. So I've got that as well, and I usually carry those on me wherever I go, and so do a lot of other people that you'd probably be surprised that they do that with. Now, where is the failure here? Why are we even talking today? Why am I giving this speech? It's because we never, ever learn from our mistakes. I already mentioned one earlier where we're sicking lawyers on someone who just tried to tell us the truth about something, about a vulnerability. One of the other big problems we actually see is the fact that I don't care or it's not my problem-ism is still a very, very big problem whenever it comes to reporting these things. And last but not least, the biggest problem of all is not preparing to fail at all. Because when you're not preparing to fail, you're failing to prepare for what's going to happen, right? I know that was really, really hard, bad wordplay there, but the idea behind that is plan to make a mistake, plan to have yourself hacked, plan to have the disaster. And everybody that is usually in planning says, oh, we have a disaster recovery plan, or we have a business continuity planning right here, right? That's fantastic, right? Most people never exercise that problem. They never go through saying, okay, here's the problem. Today everybody's not gonna do regular work. We're gonna go ahead and you've just been cyber attacked. You have to back away from your desks. This is the scenario. We're gonna run through everything you're supposed to be doing today. Has anybody ever been through one of these before? Yeah, so there we go, right? And it should happen with regular employees, both city employees, everybody should have this. I know we do fire drills. I know we do flood drills and hurricanes, and unfortunately in America we have a lot of shooter drills in our high schools and schools, right? But the one thing we don't plan for is this thing behind, okay, all the systems have gone down, nothing works again. We've been pwned, or something's happened to critical infrastructure. Now we need to go and plan for that, or at least practice on it. And the other thing too is the biggest problem, but for not planning for that sort of stuff, is that a lot of the leadership say, oh, we'll just put some more cybersecurity on it, we'll be okay. Well, more cybersecurity typically means people you make it harder for people to do their work, especially when it comes to cities, right? So what do people do? They work around you. People are very inventive, everybody's intelligent, everybody can do their job pretty effectively, and when you stop making their job effective or easier to do, they will simply find a way around your rules and your cybersecurity, right? Every time. As a great philosopher once said, let me put it this way, a great philosopher Mike Tyson once said, it's great to have a plan until someone punches you in the face, right? So that's exactly what we're talking about here, and how we can address this problem, and we'll get to exactly how to do it. One of the biggest things about learning how to fail or planning to fail is knowing exactly what's going to fail and when it's going to fail. So who uses Microsoft stuff in here? Come on, raise your hands. I used to work for them. They're not going to send in ninjas to come kill me after this speech, trust me. So, as a matter of fact, many of the friends acknowledge this every day and try to do better all the time. But you'll notice you're going to find at least 3 or 4 well-known cybersecurity companies on this same list that have become the problem, right? And so the biggest problem is we just can't heap more cybersecurity on something. So now we have to plan to be resilient to cyber and not just cyber secure, right? So being secure is one thing, being cyber resilient is a completely different concept, right? So anybody have a secondary computer at home in case the other one screws up? Okay, y'all are cyber resilient. That's a great first step. Anybody back up any of their data on the regular? All right, put your hands down if it's to the cloud. Okay, yeah, fewer, right? So the cloud is just somebody else's computer that you don't control. So, there's a problem with that, right? So there's the problem. But the biggest problem, again, and I'm gonna keep going back to this because it's a theme, is the chewy center of all this is no longer, now we have this thing called zero trust. So now our networks and our computers are no longer the chewy center because you don't have a boundary firewall and then everything else is open, because now everybody's done this segmentation stuff and they've gotten more secure. The chewy center is still the human, right? Because now the newest way to get into everybody's company is actually through the humans and tricking them into giving them their passwords and doing a bunch of other things. So the other thing too is we don't patch enough or quickly enough, but I think we all know that because it's hard and sometimes the patch becomes the problem. So you have to have some sort of recovery even from the patches. I probably haven't heard anybody say that before in cybersecurity, but the patch is sometimes a bigger problem than the actual vulnerability itself, right? And that's the same thing with cancer drugs. Sometimes that's what actually kills you and not the actual cancer. And the same thing goes for patching occasionally. So what I'm proposing is everybody has a resiliency system of some sort. Now that could be a plan if you're talking about an extra computer and backing up your data and having multi-factor tokens, not just on your phone, but maybe a small device you throw in a safe somewhere to have all your passwords on it, right? Because eventually some of us get hit by buses and the passwords are all lost and you're in trouble, or your spouse or your significant other partner is in trouble then as well. So just those things are the plan for the resiliency system. When it comes to cities and smart infrastructure though, The one thing we don't do is we don't put in resilient systems right now. We put in lots of cybersecurity systems. We even put in safety systems, but safety is not resiliency. Safety, especially if you're talking about industrial control systems, is the safe shutdown of a process. So I have an oil refinery and I'm making gasoline or something like that. That's a very explosive process, right? If I don't shut it down properly or in order, it has a much bigger explosion than we really want, right? So what safety systems are there is when it hits a critical point, it will safely shut down the entire system. That's not resilient because that doesn't mean it's up or working. That's not resilience. It's the opposite of that. So sometimes we get these safety systems mixed up with resiliency, right? Resilience is, can I fight through any given problem? And that requires you to think through what the problem is going to be first. And when you're dealing with hacking and these sorts of things, especially when it comes to IoT devices on any big city, whether it's measuring temperature, whether it's traffic lights, whether it's cameras for safety, or even for traffic flows and things like that. When you're dealing with these things, the hack of them, because they're all just tiny Linux computers, most of them, right? You have to have some kind of fallback mechanism, and that fallback mechanism could be a completely separate network. It can be a completely separate system that would be much smaller than the primary system to at least keep some operation, the most important operations going. And what do I mean by the most important operations? Typically, most people, and the biggest idea behind resilience is you have to do what they call a minimum viable operating plan, right? What is the only things you need to make the thing operate? Other people call it crown jewel, like crown on your head, analysis, right? What's the very, very minimum you need to keep going, and then make a copy of just that, and then put it on a completely different system. Now that's a very different idea than a lot of other people have had so far, and it's very, very hard to go through one of these crown jewels, because every time I go through one with a big company or a city or even a federal government, they're always like, ooh, me, I'm the most important, right? So that's the hardest thing is, okay, so if you're the most important, if you fail, what stops happening? Oh, we stop processing loans. I think we're gonna be okay? But then the same person will go back, well, if I fail also, we stop being able to write checks. That's a bigger problem than most people think. I currently work for one of the largest cities in the entire world, and doing some consulting. And one of their biggest problems is through a natural disaster or through a hacking disaster or what have you, they have to make sure that the police, the firemen, and everybody else like that continues to get paid. Why? They have to feed their children. They have to go buy groceries. They have to do everything just like we do. And if you stop being able to pay those people, they stop having money, and thus your services stop, right? So we actually created a resiliency system specifically for check writing and being able to write checks from the city to firemen and everybody else like that. We've moved to a remote site. We have a communication system for all those critical employees, and we've moved that system to where it's actually portable now. We can write checks anywhere. So if it floods here, it floods there, if lightning strikes here, if there's a fire there, we can move this system around, right? That actually also has to be pretty unhackable too, and that becomes a big problem, right? So how do we make that happen? Well, you have to isolate the management of everything. That's not the data of everything. So everybody thinks that you have to secure the data. Well, the big problem is that most of those firewalls that you saw in that previous picture that have problems, people leave the management interfaces directly on the same network that all their user data is on. Well, who gets hacked? The users do. So when you've done that, you've now allowed the hackers to have administrative or management access to your cybersecurity equipment. And that's a huge problem. People do it all the time because they don't think it's going to be a problem. Oh, it's a cybersecurity piece of equipment. It's not attackable. I prove differently, right? So what you need to do now is you need to actually isolate all of your management from everything on a completely separate system, or at least isolate it with a process, right? And how do you do it with a process? Well, you have multi-factor authentication, or you have what you call, and MGM could have used this, break the glass accounts. Has anybody ever heard of this concept before? Okay, break the glass accounts are accounts you've created in secret through another, like a local account on a system, right? That you've then encrypted it and put it on a USB key and then thrown it in the safe. This is the same thing you would do at home with all your passwords that you have to update every once in a while. And that process right there will actually separate all authentication that you have and allow you to take back control of the system later on. This is something MGM Grand really could have used about a year ago, right? Anybody in IT or operational technology or industrial control systems? Okay. Jump boxes. Everybody's got one, right? Because everybody needs to be able to get into their stuff and do their work. And you don't always want to be carrying around that one laptop with you, because that one laptop gets stolen and you get the idea, it gets dropped. Sometimes I've even dropped a laptop nearly, in the bathroom in the shower one time, because I was trying to be on a conference call at the same time I was trying to take a shower, which was a really bad idea, but that's probably a little too much information for everybody. But anyways, it happens. So everybody has a jump box. Now, people that are leadership, they don't know that you have these jump boxes. They don't even know that you need them, right? Every time I've ever gone to do a hack or penetration on any other company, I find these as quickly as I can. Why? They've got all the good stuff on them. They've got all the administration tools. They've got all the scripts. They've got all the really good logins to own the organization. So if I find that jump box in the organization that your IT people own, and you probably don't know about it if you're leadership, that's the first thing I pop. And then very quickly thereafter, sometimes it's been as little as 5 or 10 minutes where I've been able to own an organization very, very quickly. Now, to create these, everything I've listed here is completely open source, right? I believe wholeheartedly and violently pro open source. And that's because you have code review, you can share code, there's all kinds of things to do. So everybody in this room, if you have a cheap little computer for $35, you can put yourself together an isolated recovery environment with all these tools in it for yourself, right? So take pictures if you want to. This is all open source. I've got a GitHub on it. So I try to make this an idea that people can use, because the biggest problem I had in my 10 years of doing stuff for Fortinet is, I talk about cybersecurity all the time, but then someone comes up to me and says, I had all this Fortinet stuff, and I had all this Palo Alto stuff, and I had all the Cisco stuff, but then we still got hacked, right? And then I asked them, well, did you plan to fail at any time? Was this ever going to be a problem? Like that. Was this ever going to be a problem? And their answer invariably is no, right? Or even if they do have a plan, I said, have you practiced it? And they say no. So the action item I want to give everybody here is not just to stop by and talk and ask questions at our booth or even after this, but I want you to go and try to see what your current organization or even your city has and what they do for these sorts of exercises. Because I'll tell you right now, cities will never pay attention to these things or the services until somebody goes and asks the question, what happens if we stop being able to pay the police or the firemen? Anyways, that's been my talk today. Thank you all very much for coming. If anybody has any question, please ask. Raise your hands. If I overwhelmed anybody today with talk about being a hacker and stuff like that, I apologize in advance, but if y'all would like to know a little bit more about doing that sort of stuff, stop by our booth over there. So thank you very much.